Hello and welcome everyone to iMoot 15. For this session, Big Data, Small Data, Trendy Data, we have Lewis Carr, long-term Moodler, working and consulting in UK further education. If you haven't already done so, this is a quick plug for Lewis's blog. Have a read of lewiscarr.co.uk, doing funky things with Moodle since 2004. It's a great place to go to get advice. I often refer to it, especially the recent post that you were doing about the lesson activity. It's some really fantastic stuff. So I really encourage everybody to go and check out Lewis's blog and follow him on Twitter. So thank you very much for presenting again at the iMoot this year. And I hope everyone enjoys your session.
Thanks very much, Vinny. Welcome, everybody. So Vinny's done a good job of introducing me there. So I am an old school Moodler, if you will. I presented it at the very first iMoot, actually. I think it was about 5 years ago now. And then I dropped off the planet for a while when we had a couple of children, and now they're progressing well. So I'm back and with more time to do things like this, which is nice. So I'm from the UK. My background is in further education and higher education, but I've done some work with corporate training involving Moodle as well. I've had a number of Moodle hats over these years. Originally, I'm from a design developer background, moved into teaching, then moved into consultancy, went into sales, and now back in the land of consultancy and some development. So feel free to ask questions, during this presentation. I'm happy to just talk to you and let you multitask and click on other things. But if you do want to get involved and ask questions, then that would be great. You don't have to use the mic. Feel free to use the chat. I'll keep my eye on the chat window as we go and as we progress. This presentation is going to be divided into 3 distinct sections. So section 1, we're going to be talking about big data and small data and touching on analytics. The second part of the presentation is going to be looking at how analytics are used in retail and how we can contrast that against how we use data in Moodle. And then the last and third and final part of the presentation is going to be just looking at some research data that I've found, which I want to share with everybody because I think it's of some real use, and how we can look at that data and better shape our Moodle experience. So I'll progress to the next slide. So this presentation is based on some findings I did last year as a small research project. I've got lots of friends and ex-colleagues working in various colleges and universities up and down the country, and basically asked them for some help with finding out some information, got them to run some queries for me, and then fed that information back at me so I could build up a bigger picture of Moodle usage and Moodle data in the United Kingdom. So the goals of the project was really to find out how we are using Moodle and to see if we can take this information and make some predictions and shape how we're going to use Moodle tomorrow. So a quick overview on analytics. Now, I don't want to get involved too heavily in this analytics, but I think it's important that we do set the context really. So analytics is basically analyzing data. It's looking for meaningful patterns within inside data. And therefore, learning analytics is the measurement of data that reports on the learners and their learning context. So anything that's related to learning that we can pull data from is learning analytics. It's the study of this data. So big data and small data. So what's the difference? So big data is, it says in the slides there, a term for large and complex data sites. So think about data warehousing. Think about the Met Office in the UK that collects all this weather information so they can start to make predictions and forecast the weather. Small data, on the other hand, is data that answers specific questions or addresses specific problems. So Moodle is a great tool for analyzing small data. So we've all got access to the Moodle logs, hopefully, and the Moodle log file is a great place for small data. By collecting lots of different Moodle logs from different sites, we can build up a much larger data set. So trend data, or trendy data, is looking for correlations and identifying trends within the data. And these measurements are often based on time because that's the easiest way to actually see patterns in the data. With trend estimation, we can then start to make statements and justify some of the statements that we're making in the data. So we can look at how often users are logging into Moodle, when users are logging into Moodle, why are users logging into Moodle, why are they spending X amount of time on Moodle in this area and less time in this area. So we can start to hopefully get answers to some of these questions. So that's just a really brief overview into analytics. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to the second part of the session. And really what we're going to look at is how the retail industry are using analytics. And then we're going to compare and contrast some of the practices they do and how we can bring them across into our teaching and learning, more importantly, into Moodle. So big data is a big money industry. So the more data somebody collects, the more that data is actually worth to them or selling that on to somebody else. So this slide, have I sold my soul to the data mining devil? So I'm sure a few of you are familiar with some of these brands and services on this screen here. These are just some of the online tools which I use as a consumer, if you will. So Nectar cards, the first card there. So every time I pay for my shopping and the lady behind the checkout asks me if I have a Nectar card and I hand that card over, that's logging all the products and services that I've been buying. If I fill up my car with petrol, then Nectar know which garage I'm filling my car up from, how often I'm filling my car up, and how often and how much I'm spending on petrol. Same with the Tesco's Club Card on the top line in the middle. The Club Card was one of the first reward cards, if you will, for supermarkets, but it's a tool that basically allows Tesco's to analyze all the information going into your shopping basket and start to make predictions. So they understand the frequency of your shops, how long you're spending in the shops, how much you spend in the shops, etc. And also the humble Visa card or MasterCard, every time you buy something on there, this is logged, and then Visa can then sell this information to third parties so they can analyze it for their own needs. Looking at the social media sites on the bottom, Facebook, Netflix. I use Facebook for personal, to keep in touch with friends and family. But every time I tag a picture, and if I tag that with a location, Facebook knows where I've been. Facebook understands who are my friends and who are my family. They're building up a demographic on age, sex, ethnicity, whether somebody's married, whether somebody's single, and all this information is going into one huge data warehouse, which can then be analyzed and predictions can be made. They can tailor advertisements to us, and they can also tailor and improve the platform as well. Netflix knows what I like to watch, how often I like to watch, what time of day I like to watch television. Google, I signed up to Gmail in the early beta stage. And so Google have been reading my emails for a long, long time. And lastly, Amazon also as well know lots about me. Every time I buy something, they're making predictions on what I might buy next. Can I just check people can still hear me? Somebody's mentioned that the sound's cut off. Okay, excellent. So this is what I see when I log on to Amazon. So this builds up a picture and a profile about me. You can see here that I've purchased some children's left-handed scissors, a window safety kit, and a nightlight. So when you look at this, it actually paints up a picture that I'm a paranoid parent or a safety-conscious parent. I'm buying safety scissors. I don't want my children to fall out of windows, and I like to keep my children less scared at night by having a nightlight. So And that is actually true, but it could also mean that I'm left-handed myself. I've got really small hands, and then it's myself that likes to jump out of windows, or I'm scared of the dark. Again, it's how we interpret this information, and this is something we have to be careful about in Moodle. So it's very easy to make predictions or assumptions about a learner based on information and based on data. So again, we have to be extremely careful when we are analyzing data that we're not making assumptions for learners that are incorrect. So let's briefly look at some supermarket analytics, and we're going to contrast that to Moodle analytics and see some of the ways in which supermarkets use data to build up profiles on their customers and how we can use data to build up profiles on our learners. So have you ever wondered how supermarkets manage to have just the right amount of burgers when it's barbecue weather? Well, they use forecasting techniques that predict when we may or may not buy a particular product. So they even monitor minor changes in the temperature, and they change the stock levels and the positioning of items within stores. That correlates to the weather. And this is known as predictive analytics. And predictive analytics is something we can do in Moodle, and something we're going to talk about in this session. So here's some useful facts for you, because I like to give you some useful bits of information and teach as I go along. So when UK temperatures rise 4 degrees, beef burger sales increase by 42%, which is quite phenomenal. When the UK weekend temperatures rise 10 degrees, barbecue meats increase 300% and coleslaw by 50%, yet the demand for vegetables drops 25%. And the cold weather increases sales of cauliflower, soup, long life milk, sausages, and root vegetables. So this is all pretty obvious stuff, things we would expect to see. Sunny weather, more barbecues, more people outside. So when we look at this information, we start to think of what this means in terms of Moodle. So does bad weather mean more people stay inside, more people learn on Moodle? Students that are not logging on Moodle, does that mean they're getting what they need from Moodle, or they're getting what they need from class? Again, we need to dig deeper before we can start to make these assumptions. This is just a little interesting bit of trivia for you in there. So the Brits apparently always buy more salad on Mondays, and the reasoning behind this is that we overindulge at the weekend. I'm not sure about the overindulging bit, although I'm sure that's true for many of us, but statistically, Brits do buy more salad on Mondays. And that's an interesting statement to look at. So if more of your students are logging into Moodle on a Monday, why is that? Why should we be questioning why Mondays is the day everybody logs onto Moodle and Tuesday isn't? Loyalty cards, again, I'm not going to labour the point too long. I will be getting to the Moodle stuff, so do bear with me. But loyalty cards are interesting because some of the supermarket chains receive data on 2/3 of all shopping baskets. So they really do help to shape our spending habits. Everywhere we go leaves a digital footprint. And then they use this digital footprint to make decisions about what products they're going to sell us. So every time a student enters Moodle, they are also leaving a digital footprint, because Moodle is a login machine. Moodle will log every click that you do, every click a student does, and every click a teacher does. And there's a whole wealth of information there. There's a whole digital footprint behind that. And once we start to pull and extrapolate that data, we can really start to make some decisions about layouts in Moodle, navigations, where to put things in menus, where to place menus, which resources are getting clicked on the most, and why are these resources getting clicked on the most. So we can really use it from a teaching and learning pedagogical perspective, but we can also use this even as a design perspective when you're creating your Moodle themes. Now, we do have to touch on this ethical harvesting, because although I do want you all to go off and analyze your Moodle logs, we've also got to be quite sensitive about what information we are going to pull and how we're going to use this information. Some of the supermarket chains, one that begins with M, I'll let you Google that, in the UK, is looking to tackle obesity and wants to see whether customers would welcome tailored suggestions to shop more healthily. And again, it's quite a scary concept if you're wired up to Fitbit trackers and all kinds of things and logging your weight and you're running on all these apps. And then if that information fell in the hands of a supermarket and they can contrast your your lifestyle, to your eating. You know, there's some really grey areas there that I'm not too sure we should be going into. So again, let's just be conscious about, you know, when we are mining data. So when I was getting this data, I made sure that all the data I received back from the participants was anonymized, so it couldn't be tied back to a particular institution, organization, or more importantly, to a user. So it was all anonymous information because I wanted to share this information with people and not reveal things that we shouldn't, or things that were unethical to release. So let's get on to the Moodle stuff. So hopefully that's just covered the introduction. I'm just reading some of the chats in here. So Vinny's kindly posted a link in there. And Andrew said, we call this digital dirt. Excellent. I love that one. I will be tweeting digital dirt. I think that must, that's my keyword for today. So Moodle is a data mining beast. So this log file, again, depending on how active your Moodle site is, that log file can grow exponentially. There's been a huge interest in learner analytics caused by MOOCs, because MOOCs can generate enormous data sets. Not everybody finishes a MOOC, but a lot of people start a MOOC. And when you do create a MOOC, you are capturing information about that learner, their name, probably their sex, probably some of their interests. You can also then start to track, you know, what that learner's doing, how often they're logging on Moodle. Are females more likely to log on to a MOOC on an evening than men, for example? Are younger learners accessing on a weekend and older learners on a weekday? And once you start to drill into this information, you really can start to build up some interesting pictures. So these are some of the things that I tried to discover in this study. So I wanted to know what was the most engaging Moodle tool. And by engaging, that's looking at sort of the popular tools and also the tools that learners go back to. I want to know what tools are most preferred by learners. I also wanted to look at when teachers or tutors are actually creating the content. So not just looking at what content they're creating, but what times of the year are tutors creating content? Is it a mad dash before exam week? Or is it more consistent throughout the week? Or is it just a big free-for-all at the start of term and then everybody forgets to create content or can't be bothered to create content throughout the year once teaching begins? I was interested in looking at how often users are logging into Moodle, and also looking at when learners access courses. Again, putting this on a timeline for a year just to build up some trendy data. And then lastly, I want to look at what the online behavior of an active student actually looks like. So let's dig into some of these findings. So this is the first set of findings, obviously summarized. I've got lots of information, so I've had to compress and condense this just to give everybody the highlights. So you can see here that the most popular resource in terms of hits on Moodle is the assignment. Now, in the UK, the assignment in Moodle rules. Many organizations use Moodle as an assignment Dropbox, particularly using the Turnitin plugin to do the plagiarism checks, but assignments are huge. And they equate for the most hits, if you like, per activity on Moodle. I can see Fred just joined us. Hello, Fred. We're also then, the second most popular resource on Moodle is the file. So this is the PowerPoints, the PDFs, the Word documents, all those static repository style teaching resources. Then it's the URL, which is linking to other websites, so perhaps linking to other sites within Moodle, other courses in Moodle, or taking students out to YouTube and other sites. And again, you can see as we're moving down this list, the things that I like the most in Moodle are the things that are actually used the least. So when we look at this data, we see that, well, the answer is we need to create more files and more URLs and web links and less time on quizzes and on lessons. So based on that information we've shown you, that is an assumption that one could make, but actually that's the wrong assumption. just because something is being clicked on the most doesn't actually mean it's the most popular or the most engaging or the resources that learners want to click on. So when we actually look at the most engaging resource on Moodle, so this time we're looking at the number of resources, the resource count divided by the number of resources, we can see that the assignment is still clearly at the top of the table, and that's more of a how can we say an institutional thing in the UK, but quizzes is now bumped up the list and is now at 26%. And that's because students will go back to a quiz for self-assessment. They can reuse a quiz and go back to it. It's interesting that file, which is the static resources, the PowerPoints, the Word documents, they've dropped down to 4%. It's now second from the bottom of this league table. So that's telling us that students will click on files, but maybe they'll just click on that file once. Maybe they'll save that PDF locally to their machine, and maybe they won't need to go back onto Moodle for a while to get that once they've got that information. Again, lesson has also creeped up there. So lesson is an engaging tool. It's something that learners go back to. So this allows us to build a better picture. Now, we're only starting to scratch the surface here of what this information tells us, but it tells us that files are popular with students because of the sheer number of them. So if tutors are still uploading static resources, and that's all there is on Moodle, then that's all there is for students to click on. Therefore, it'll look as though that's a popular resource. But actually, when we look at the interactive resources, the quizzes, the lessons, and the forums, they have a much higher hit rate when we actually compare the averages. So although there's less of them, they're actually being clicked on more. So if there was more of them, the average would obviously increase. This has led me to the conclusion that students tend to revisit quizzes and lessons more than they do files. And this is proof, I think, that self-assessment actually increases learner engagement. So we've all known for years that teaching on Moodle with static files and web links isn't a great practice, and we would love to see more interaction, more forums, more quizzes, more lessons. And yes, they are more time consuming to build, but ultimately this does actually benefit the learner. A little bit of a joke here. One thing does remain constant, though, that using folders on Moodle still sucks. Students do not like using folders. Even when there's lots of them, they don't tend to click on them, and we still buy more salad on Monday. If you're late to the presentation, that won't make any sense. So we can cut that out. Don't worry too much about that. So I'm going to get you involved now. So in the chat window, I just want to get you guys thinking. What do you think is the most engaging tool, feature, or function in Moodle? Now, I did present this at the Moodle Moot last month. So if you were at that session, then you know the answer. Please don't reveal it. So Bob says forums. Mateo says forums. Labels. Forums, but chat could be. Okay. Has anybody dare deviate from forums? Quizzes? Forum. The chat still stinks on Moodle. It does. It does. It's better than it was, but it's still an interesting tool. Okay, so I think that's everybody who's giving students admin rights now. That would be brilliant. Now that would make a fantastic study if we gave students admin rights on Moodle and see how they build a Moodle. When we were at the Moodle Moot, actually, it was quite interesting. We were discussing, how as teachers we like to make suggestions for Moodle and say Moodle should do this and Moodle should do that, and we would end up with a very strange Moodle if we listened to what everybody wanted. And can you imagine what Twitter would look like if it was designed by teachers? They would be saying 140 characters, that's not enough, we need 280 characters, and I need to be able to do this and this, and it would just not be the Twitter that we use today. So slightly off topic, but just giving you a chance to answer that question. Okay, I'll tell you what the most engaging tool in Moodle is, and it's not actually a teaching resource per se. It's the messaging module. So the Moodle messaging tool is actually 4 times more engaging for learners than any other activity, tool, resource, or function in Moodle. Now, this was quite a surprise for me. I mean, at my previous institutions where I worked in a large 16 to 19-year-old college, messaging was huge. Messaging, we were receiving people using 30,000 messages a day or more, pinging messages to tutors and to friends and things like that. So what's messaging used for? Well, messaging, obviously I'm not allowed to read any of the messages, nor did I ask for any information on messaging. But from what I can tell you is messaging is used to initially just for students to mess around and talk to each other and chat to each other. Then eventually students start to see some benefits in messaging their tutor and getting that, not real-time information back from them, but knowing that that message is being sent, that the tutor will see that message and hopefully reply to that message. Now, I suggested in the Moodle Moot that perhaps we should start to use messaging more in our teaching and learning. This is a tool that students clearly want, and this is a tool that students clearly use, yet we're spending all of our time building quizzes, struggling with the workshop module, fighting the lesson module, and really we have a tool that's already in Moodle that, as clunky as it may seem to us, students kind of like that retro feel to it. They're used to more real-time chat windows such as in Google or in Facebook or even WhatsApp's almost now real-time in the speed that students reply to WhatsApp messages. But the messaging tool does have something quite quirky about it. I've seen it used in colleges where a sports department got all their students into groups and got them to send their research information on a particular subject to other students via the messaging tool. And then the group leader then copied and pasted all those messages and put them into an assignment or into a wiki, which then they could grade. So it can be used effectively, and I'm just not saying you all need to turn messaging on, but it's definitely something, if you want to drive engagement and adoption on Moodle, then it's definitely something that we can't ignore. So maybe it needs improving. Maybe we need to do some development on that to make it more swish. Maybe it's retro look is what the lure is, what the pull is. I'm not sure, but it's 4 times more engaging than any other tool on Moodle. And if you look at your logs, if you've got messaging enabled, you'll be quite surprised to see just the sheer volume of people that are actually using messaging. Lisa just said from a user interface perspective, it is challenging for instructors, and it is. It doesn't seem as intuitive as it could be, and the small pop-up that appears isn't the best. I mean, it has got better in certain themes. Again, if it's a user interface issue, that's quite an easy thing to fix. I've worked with many organizations in the country, and many people turn messaging off because it's used incorrectly and inappropriately by students. So students are sending offensive messages, people are reporting messages, and the whole thing's quite difficult to manage. My response to that, quite controversially, can be, it's easier to manage something that you control than something you don't. So I would rather students were using messaging in Moodle than messaging on Facebook or on Snapchat and other tools that I can't control, that I don't have a log of. So perhaps it's got some advantages that if you are going to use messaging and social learning, then maybe it's the tool to use it in Moodle. So let's move on to the next part of the talk, which is when are teachers building course content. So this is really quite an interesting graph. So let's look at, hopefully I should be able to move a small red dot around on the screen. So September is traditionally the start of term in the UK for colleges and universities. So as you'd expect here, we usually have something called induction week, and this is where new students come to their organisation and they do their library tours, their campus tours and all those things, and then they get introduced to Moodle. So then as term starts and goes underway, they refer to Moodle quite a bit, running up till October, and then suddenly things start to take a dive. Now things start to take a dive because we're hitting December, and what happens in December is Christmas, and although Christmas is a 1 day or 2 day event in the UK, it seems to wipe out the whole of December, and people start to break up for Christmas in their minds a lot earlier than perhaps they should. So things really do start to taper off towards Christmas, and again things radically pick up in January. For the start of the new term. So people do New Year's resolutions, I must log on Moodle more, or I must work harder with my studies, whatever that reason is. January is a huge spike in Moodle usage. Then that does start to tailor off. And we'll find that teachers tend to not engage with Moodle as much then throughout the year in terms of building content. Yes, they'll be grading assignments, so perhaps they're spending more time grading assignments and answering forum posts. Perhaps they don't need to create more resources on Moodle because they've created all those resources in September and October, or maybe they've done that in the summer. But one thing is quite apparent here is that teachers certainly aren't building content between March and August, and if they are, it's few and far between. These are a couple of other useful discoveries. So on a mature Moodle site, so a Moodle site that's 3 years or above, resources, file uploads actually decreases annually by 15%. So when you first get a Moodle site and you've got a new, empty, shiny, bright website, everybody goes crazy uploading PDFs and PowerPoints and these things. But actually, after about 3 years plus, this really is on the decline. And that's because many teachers have actually uploaded the content. Maybe they don't need to edit some of these PowerPoints and these Word documents. So this does actually decline. Interestingly, interactive activities decreases, although it still decreases in terms of the content people are building, it decreases at a slower rate, and it's just a 2% decrease. I found this quite interesting because it does tell you that Moodle content creation is finite, and that you will hit a plateau with content and course development. So this is quite an interesting graph. So does anybody want to hazard a guess as to why we have a spike in March for student course activity? Andrew says coursework, exams, due dates. Yeah. In the UK, it's mostly assignments. So yes, coursework. So this was quite interesting. So when I first saw this graph, the first thing that jumped out was this spike, and I looked into this, thought, what is with this spike? I mean, I knew it was assignments based on my experience, but I needed to get that proof. So I did looked at the queries and looked at the information that I had in more detail, and actually looked at the resources that were getting hit the most in progressively in that month of March, and it is the assignment activity on Moodle. Is that why Turnitin is rubbish then? Don't get me started on Turnitin. Well, that can be a talk for another day. But yeah, it's interesting. It really is interesting. And when you do start to look at this information in your own Moodle sites, it's really good to start to make some judgments as to why this is happening, because this data does tell a story. And I guess you get to make predictions as well for next year. So if you overlay that graph with next year's, you would expect to see a very, very similar trend. We'd expect to see a sharp rise in March. So here's a couple of other useful nuggets of information for you. So looked at the top 50 learners from each institution. I've called them loyal customers, going back to this supermarket analogy that we used earlier, and I'll explain in the latter slides. But our most active and engaged learners actually access, on average, 13 courses on Moodle. Now, some institutions will split a course up into meta courses, child courses. So they may have, if it's a BTEC, they'll have modules. So they may have 10 modules that make up one course. But on average, the learner is accessing around about 13 different course areas. And the learner accesses Moodle on and off 91 days in the academic year, which is about twice per week, which is interesting. Not 91 days solid on Moodle, 24 hours a day. We wish, but that's not the case. But 91 days. So if each learner's accessing Moodle twice a week, is that enough? So what does this actually mean? So if we start to ask the questions, why are we using Moodle? What's the purpose? What's the goal? What's our benchmark for this? An institution may say, well, we'd expect our students to be logging in every day. We need our students to be logging on 5 days a week. But look at this information. Students are only logging on twice a week. So perhaps we need to do more to get more students logging on. Again, it depends on your goals and what you're trying to achieve. So this is just site logins now. So this graph is quite interesting. Again, you can see the start of term, there's few logins, but then as term goes underway, October, November, logins increase. And then again over Christmas, people go on holiday, students go on holiday, tutors go on holiday, things start to dip in December. Again, picking up in January as we would expect. And then things start to trail down towards the latter months. There's a little bit of a spike in May and June for exams. And again, in summer, everybody just goes on holiday. There's nobody in a university or college. It's a great time to get things done on Moodle and to do your housekeeping, but it's not a particular productive time for content creation or for students learning. Again, if you've got courses that are wholly online or that run a roll-on, roll-off program, then you'll have different data, different statistics, but these are some of the statistics that we're seeing for colleges and universities. So here's another little interesting discovery in here. Logins double in the second year of running Moodle. So you'd expect that to keep doubling then for year on, but that doesn't happen. Moodle logins hit a critical mass at 3 years plus, where the actual number of students logging in starts to even out. And then this can be mirrored basically from every year forward. So sites that have been running more than 3 years tend to not increase in the number of their logins, and that's because they've got a fixed number of students, probably a similar number of courses and programs running. Again, so we can start to make predictions and look at what's happening. Do we need to get more learners on Moodle? Can we be using Moodle more effectively? Can we do more distance learning? And we start to build up some really good information. So what does all this data actually tell us? So again, I'm summarizing some of this information, and some of it is and has to be guesswork without tapping into bigger data sets. You'd need to do this on a big scale. We'd have to look at library data, attendance data, grades data, MAS data, but we're only looking at the actual Moodle data here. So the more information you can pull in, the clearer the picture that we can paint. But we can see here that there is a need for more quizzes, more lessons and forums. There is that need for greater interactivity. And the reason for that is, and we know it creates better teaching, but also students are more engaged at using those tools. And now we have some data and some proof to really go back to colleges and universities and say, look, we know this is what students want. Maybe we need to adapt our messaging into our teaching practices. So we talk about social learning, we talk about forums, we talk about ways to engage with our learners socially, and the messaging tool is already there in Moodle, and it does do a good job of that, and maybe we should incorporate this into our social teaching. Moodle usage is still driven by term calendars, unfortunately or fortunately, which tells us that Moodle's still been used in a very blended learning capacity in the UK. We can map Moodle usage and correlate that against term dates and holiday dates, and we really can see that it does almost mirror what's going on in the academic calendar, which does lead to that notion that this is used as a blended learning environment. That could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. Again, depends on the goals of the organization. What we do know is that we need more student engagement in December, April and June, because that's when it's at its lowest. So what resources could we be creating in those months or in the run up to those months that we're not creating, that would perhaps engage our students a bit more in those months and get them on Moodle and really get to to drive that usage? So just getting towards the end of the presentation now, just looking at what supermarkets would do. So if a supermarket had a quiet month in May and they looked at their till records and said, look, May is really, really bad, I believe they would actually do something about that. If they're finding out from their shoppers why are you not coming in May? Is it to do with the weather? Is it to do with the economy? They would proactively do things in their supermarket to actually change shoppers' behavior, and maybe we should be doing some of those things in Moodle. So, to get more shoppers in, they would put on offers and promotions. Again, it could open up the discussion of gamification. There's been some great sessions on gamification, and in the previous sessions I've been watching on the iMoot. Perhaps gamification is a way to incentivize and to get learners into Moodle. Strategy 2, if shoppers can't find things on the shelves, if shoppers are finding, struggling to find the baked bean aisle, then Asda would do something about that. They would either signpost shoppers to the baked bean aisle, or perhaps they would move the baked beans to a more predominant position. And again, this analogy we're gonna relate back to Moodle theme design here. If your learners are struggling to find a particular activity, then maybe we need to signpost them to it. If students are struggling to find the messaging tool or to engage with a particular tool, perhaps we need to move it. And strategy 3 is about shelf life management and replenishment planning of products. And again, this is something we can look at in Moodle in terms of content. Content shouldn't be left to go stale on Moodle shelves. It should be fresh. It should be changed. It should be moved around. And we've seen from the statistics that I've shown in the previous slides that tutors are creating things at the start of term and they're not so much then towards the end of term. So maybe that end of term part, and I understand tutors are busy with teaching commitments, but maybe that's a time to begin to upload some new materials or to replenish existing materials. And again, I've summarized that on here. So student-driven landing pages could increase that. Improving course layouts and Moodle usage, looking at the analytics and then changing the theme to reflect those analytics. If any of you are using Google Analytics in Moodle, you can start to see some interesting things that are going on there in terms of hotspots and areas that are being clicked on. So if you are looking at interfaces or menus, you can get some really good information from Google Analytics as well. And again, strategy 3, as we've discussed, is replenishing that content. So I was able to very briefly look at some corporate use of Moodle. So I manage a few corporate Moodle sites for some small clients and asked them for some information as well. And got not as big a uptake in the response, but still some interesting statistics here. Quizzes and SCORMs and forums are the most popular tool used in corporate training. And this is because corporates tend to build more content in things like Articulate Storyline and things, because it's a quick and easy way for them to generate that content. And the reason they use quizzes more is because they're having to test for competencies, and the course is very linear. It leads itself to watching a video or interacting with a SCORM package and then taking a quiz and getting a certificate. So that is, the drive on the corporate use of Moodle. Learners are enrolled on average of and access around 2 courses. So it was 13 courses for FE and HE. For corporate, it's around about 2 per learner. Logins are pretty consistent throughout the entire year. There's only 2 months when logins actually dip, and that's December and July. December, I can only equate that to Christmas again, with people's minds being on other things other than Moodle. And I don't have answers for July as to why that would be a low quiet season for corporate. If anybody has any suggestions, then please put them in the chat, because I couldn't pull out any information that would tell me that. And this is interesting. Learner engagement is actually much shorter for corporate use of Moodle. It's between 30 and 40 days. And I think that's because the courses are more structured with you get on, do this course and complete it, that it's more condensed, it's more concise rather than, well, it's certainly not as blended. Someone's put in there summer holiday. It could be summer holiday, yes, absolutely. 6 weeks, summer holidays and things for corporate. So that brings us to the end of my presentation. Hopefully that's been about 45 minutes there or thereabouts. So any questions that anybody has, please put them in the chat. So what platform do you use to enrich your analytics data? I've quite fortunate that I'm quite technical, so I'm able to extrapolate data with SQL queries, and then I'm dropping them into some tools that I've written myself to get that information. But there's I've seen people use there's some nice Moodle blocks that people have created for analytics. There's also Google Analytics, and there's the open source version, which is Piwik as well, which is quite good for generating information, looking at the most downloaded files and access for times of day and things. But to be honest, the best way to do this is just to get into your database and start pulling some queries in there. If you look at the ad hoc reports or the configurable reports block in Moodle, there's some docs on the Moodle website, which some really useful queries in there that really start to get you thinking about that some of the information that you can pull from Moodle. No, Google Analytics and Piwik doesn't give you usage on your plugins. That is something that you have to do from an SQL query. And that gives you more flexibility because it really allows you to drill down that information. If it's your Moodle course, then obviously you should already be familiar with the courses, not so much the learners, but the courses and most likely the staff that are engaging with it. So things become much easier to see patterns and trends when you actually understand the data that you're looking at. Yeah, as Andrew's just said there, for an overview, Google Analytics is fantastic, but for a deep dive and a drill down, then the logs is where the real value is. So your Moodle log table is one. There's also the course access table in there as well, which is another useful one. It shows you the date when the user last accessed a course, and then you can group them by users or group them by course and really start to get some information. Configure reports, again, another really useful block. Lots of really useful queries that people are sharing on Moodle.org, which queries that I hadn't even thought of yet, and I've gone in and looked at some of those queries and thought that's a fantastic idea. And then once you get used to writing these reports, it's you start to then think of new reports and ways which you can customize and build upon people's existing reports as well to really drill down that information. Bearing in mind it's changing slightly in Moodle 2.9 due to the legacy logs and the new way of doing reporting, but that's going to be a good thing because that's going to allow us to get to this information much easier moving forward. How many days worth of log files do you maintain to get meaningful data? Historically, I never deleted a log file when I was a Moodle administrator for a large college because I wanted to go back and contrast year 2 to year 3, etc., and really start to look into that. But you get meaningful data just from looking at 1 year. I mean, if you're just looking from September through to August, you could get some really meaningful data in 1 year. It's useful to keep previous years because obviously then you can start to map trends and make better predictions based on what you've learned before. But if you've got a year's worth of data in Moodle, then that's a really good time to start analyzing the information. I think if you collect just a few months, it's not going to give you a true reflection of the entire year. And it may be slightly misleading because a brand new system may have lots of interest because it's new and it's shiny, lots of people logging on, and you'd expect that to continue, and you think that's only going to grow. But things do peter off and things do average out over the year. So Vin has just posted the link to the configurable reports. It's a great place to get started. To go in there and get some information and share with us what people have found. What would be great is if Moodle would build a bigger data set than what they've got. Because one thing I didn't mention in the beginning of the session is that moodle.org/statistics shows you all the registered Moodle sites, throughout the world. And also when you register that site, it registers the number of learners and what resources are used. And even now on some of the plugins, you can see where the plugins are installed on how many different Moodles throughout the world. So there's lots of, that's almost big data territory. So there's lots of information there that Moodle are pulling as well. And it's, if we could pull data sets per country, then we could really get a national perspective of how Moodle's been used. So thanks everybody for joining. Thank you for taking part in the chat. I don't have any Mahara data. I haven't done a study on Mahara yet, but perhaps I can, if I've not used up all my favors, perhaps that's a further study. The slides will be available on the iMoot page, on the course page that corresponds to this presentation. I'll unhide them, and so you can take them, use them, do what you will, discuss them. Hopefully it's been useful. I'm on Twitter if anybody wants to get hold of me. We can continue chatting in the forums on iMoot, and enjoy the rest of the sessions today. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, this is Vinny again. Thank you very much, Lewis. That was awesome. That was really, really good. Lots and lots for people to think about. And as I mentioned at the start, go visit Lewis's blog. That's really good as well. So thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of the iMoot, and thank you everybody for all of the questions and for participating in this session. Enjoy the rest of the iMoot.